what does a common man need to know about artificial intelligence at this point in time? What's going to be the impact of this?
Well, what the common man is wondering is, what is it going to do to my job? What is it going to do to my opportunities, if you will? That's what the common man is worried about. And that's why one of the things that we have to do, and we don't do it as well as some other countries, we have to look at the macroeconomic needs of the country and how can we end up matching that? How can we end up making changes to our education and training system? And how can we end up matching those things with the people's interest and abilities? Other countries do a better job of that. One, for example, is Germany. Germany does a much better job in doing the macroeconomic analysis, trying to make changes with regard to the education and training system, and then try to match what the economy needs with what the interest and desires and abilities of the individuals are.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning for me.
Yeah. It's good afternoon for me.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you for being here. I'll just get to the interview because we do have 10 minutes.
Sure.
As a former US Comptroller General with Global Perspective, what actions do you believe are the most critical to ensure a long-term physical health of a country, and how can governments around the world learn from each other's experience in this regard?
Well, first, I really focus on three things for U.S. fiscal sustainability. I focus on debt as a percentage of the economy. Not all debt is bad. Too much debt is, especially if it's to fuel consumption rather than investment. Secondly, how much of the budget is on autopilot, so-called mandatory spending, where you've effectively written a blank check, and then how much of the budget is for interest, because you don't get anything for interest. It's paying for past excess consumption. In the case of the United States, debt to GDP is too high already, and it's headed up rapidly. In the case of mandatory spending, when you count direct spending and tax preferences, it's 85% of the budget. How can you have a budget when 85% of your spending you've written a blank check for? And in the case of interest, we next year are going to hit the highest amount of interest as a percentage of the budget in the history of the country. We're already spending more on interest than we're spending on national defense, and it's the fastest growing expense. So we've got lots of flashing red lights in the United States. And some other countries have a challenge too. Australia is in better shape than we are, but we also have a responsibility as the largest reserve currency in the world. And so if we can't put our finances in order, a lot of other people are going to feel the adverse effects of that. And so we need to do it.
Yeah, and that brings me to the next question of then what happens to the other, for example, developing countries that then in some way depend and are guided by what's happening in America?
Well, one of the things that the United States doesn't do very well is since we are the leading global superpower, we assume that we are number one in about everything. And the truth is we're number one in a few things, but we're below average in a lot of things. We're below average with regard to our current fiscal position and outlook, okay? We're below average with regard to K through 12 education. We're below average with regard to life expectancy and infant mortality at birth. And so the key is that we need to recognize reality that, we're not exempt from the laws of prudent finance. We need to learn from history. We need to learn from others. We need to be a leader in these areas, not a laggard in these areas. And that's what I'm fighting for. I'm fighting for us to recognize the reality that we're on the wrong course and we need to change course so that we can make sure that our future is better than our past. And you've heard the saying before, Anastasia, you've heard the saying that if the U.S. gets the cold, the world gets the flu. So, I don't want us to get a cold and I don't want the world to get the flu.
Yeah, that's actually interesting for an American to agree that you're not number one in everything. That's very rare.
Well, I'm a fact-based person. And unfortunately, a lot of people in politics, and I'm not in politics, are fast and loose. And everybody's got an opinion, but they're not always consistent with the facts.
That is true. I'm very interested in your book, Come Back America, and its emphasis on physical responsibility. how can individuals and businesses contribute to creating a more financially sustainable future globally?
Well, first, Come Back America was a national bestseller, but it was released in 2010. My most recent book is America in 2040, Still a Superpower, a pathway to success. And that talks about economic security, national security, domestic tranquility, and what do we need to do. The truth is that we're on an imprudent and unsustainable path. We're going to have to make tough choices with regard to spending, with regard to revenues. And you know, the business community has a stake in this outcome, but the people who really have the biggest stake in this outcome are younger people like yourself, because they're going to pay the price and they're going to bear the burden if we don't end up dealing with this properly. And they already are going to have a lot tougher competition in an increasingly interconnected and interdependent world. So the last thing we want to do is burden them with too much debt or reduce investments in their future, which is what's going on right now. And that's what's got to be reversed.
I noted you said Australia is doing much better than America is. How much better are we doing? Because you do understand a global perspective there.
Well, I don't have the latest data, but in 2010, when I was head of the Come Back America Initiative, which was a not-for-profit organization, I partnered with Stanford University, which is one of the world's leading universities out of Palo Alto, California. And we pulled together a sovereign fiscal responsibility index that rated countries, about 50 countries, based upon their financial position and fiscal outlook and the kind of controls that they had to try to be able to keep things under control. And in that case, Australia was rated number one. I'm not saying they're number one now, but they were then, okay? And the US was rated 28. And quite frankly, things have gotten worse since then for the US. You'll have to tell me how things have done for Australia, but the data needs to be updated to know for sure.
Right. It's an interesting time because you have this conversation going on of that we are at a verge of a recession, and it's been going on for a long time, which is scary for every common man. The cost of living has gone up. It's insane. But I'm curious, what could government do right now? So we talked about the individual have a responsibility. Of course, the business world is responsible. But what could government do to ensure that we don't end up where we've been before?
Well, let's talk about what's happened in the United States, and it may have happened in your country too. We went from 1.4% inflation in January of 2021 to a peak of 9.1% in June of 2022, okay? Now we're back down to a little bit less than 4%. So it's come down, but it's still higher than it's supposed to be. What's more important is cumulative inflation over the last 3+ years has been 20+%. It's even been higher for things like energy, food, insurance, housing. These are basic essentials that everybody has to have. It was fueled by several things, but one of the things it was fueled by was out of control federal spending. You know, the federal government spent trillions of dollars, borrowed trillions of dollars, and the Federal Reserve kept interest rates too low for too long, bought a lot of that new debt. That, along with supply chain challenges that were associated with COVID-19, resulted in a spike in inflation. But the problem is we still have excess inflation, and so government has to get control of spending. We need to have more reasonable and sustainable monetary policies. We need to also look at the approach that we're taking to some legitimate challenges, but not going about it the right way, like climate change. We're trying to do too much too fast when other countries aren't doing anything. And right. You can't solve the climate change problem unless everybody's involved, because you know, the environment doesn't know geopolitical boundaries. I mean, air and water, they don't know geopolitical boundaries. So everybody's got to be playing to work it.
Yeah. That is true. And interesting you talk about the changes that are happening, and considering you're experts at that intersection of technology and policy, how do you see this shaping the future of work and the global economy?
There are pluses and minuses and question marks. The pluses, we have a real opportunity for productivity improvement. But on the other hand, to the extent that you can end up automating things that otherwise, could be done by a human, it could end up putting people out of work. All right.
Right.
So, productivity is good, but, putting people out of work is not good. So you have to really look at what kind of skills and knowledge do we need today and tomorrow, and how you can retrain and retool them to be able to deal with that. Artificial intelligence is obviously going to give us a lot of positives, but there's also a lot of uncertainty about what are you going to do to keep this thing under control. I will tell you, I won't mention the name, but I used one of the applications that's artificial intelligence. I asked it 10 questions. It got 5 of the answers wrong. So it was very good at coming up with material very, very fast, but you can't assume that it's factually accurate. So you got to make sure that you check the integrity of the facts.
Yeah, and we do have a long way to go with artificial intelligence. But I'm curious, having been in both worlds, where you're really at those conversations with government and you're really doing policies, and also seeing the common man. What does the common man need to know about artificial intelligence at this point in time? And particularly, I have an interest in developing world. What's going to be the impact of this?
Well, what the common man is wondering is, what is it going to do to my job? And what is it going to do to my opportunities, if you will? That's what the common man is worried about. And that's why one of the things that we have to do, and we don't do it as well as some other countries, we have to look at the macroeconomic needs of the country, and how can we end up matching that? How can we end up making changes to our education and training system? And how can we end up matching those things with the people's interest and abilities? Other countries do a better job of that. One, for example, is Germany. Germany does a much better job in doing the macroeconomic analysis, trying to make changes with regard to the education and training system, and then try to match what the economy needs with what the interest and desires and abilities of the individuals are. And by the way, that means not everybody's going to college, and not all college degrees are equal. And
that brings us to the point of education. What needs to change in our education systems?
Well, first, we have probably the best higher education system in the world. Okay. And I'm talking about college and university or whatever. But we're not top 25 in the world in K through 12 education results, whether it's math, whether it's science. And the truth is, we're teaching some things we shouldn't be teaching. And we're not teaching enough of the things that we should be teaching. Furthermore, there are two things that I think are essential for people to be fully functioning citizens in our republic that we don't teach at all. And that is financial literacy and civic responsibility. And I think, frankly, that's one of the reasons too many people are following the bad example of the federal government with regard to finances and civility, and that's not a good idea.